I love Debbie Reynolds, so I was really looking forward to reading My Life. I do also have her two other books, Make 'em Laugh and I think The Unsinkable, neither of which I've read. I decided to start with this one first, quite simply because I think it was the cheapest one at the time. And it took me quite a while to get through it because it's one that I decided to read a chapter a night. I wanted it to last, but once I got to about the halfway mark, I gave up with that and just read it at a more enjoyable pace because I kind of couldn't put it down. And I have to say, if you're a fan of Debbie Reynolds, I think you'll really, truly love it. It was published, I think, in the 90s, if I remember correctly, so obviously it doesn't take us through her entire life. 1989. I was close. And it starts off with maybe the first third of it talking about her childhood and then how she entered the Little Miss Burbank pageant and how she then got noticed and obviously went on to her film career. Because before I started reading this, I didn't know that Debbie Reynolds, or Mary Frances, had no background in performing at all. She's just a comedian. She liked to make people laugh, and that's kind of how she got noticed. She had never had dance lessons, singing lessons, acting lessons, nothing. And it's incredible. But actually, I'll talk more about that in a second with regards to Singing in the Rain. But that's kind of the first third of it. And then it goes into her career and then obviously her life with Eddie Fisher. That takes up about maybe less than half of it for the full book. And then it talks about her second marriage, and that takes up pretty much all of the second half. And I will say, I'd rather the second half focused a bit more on her films and her career than it did on her marriage. But because this is an honest account of her life, I guess that's the side of things that we wouldn't ordinarily know anything about. Whereas the film industry side, you're more likely to know about the films she's been in. So I can understand why that decision was made. But from a personal preference, because I've read about that part of her life in a lot of Carrie Fisher's books, I would have wanted something a bit more focusing on the film industry. But that's not to say it's completely void of her film roles. But it's just, as we get further into her career, the names of her films are appearing less and less. But she's very honest. She's very open about a lot of things. And it is definitely one of the most honest memoirs I have ever read. Now, when I said I'd come back to the whole dancing thing, I don't want to go into too much detail about anything she discusses because I don't want to ruin it, but I will talk very briefly just about this to give you an idea of how eye-opening it is. She'd never, as I said, she'd never had dancing or singing lessons. So I found that shocking because when I look at her performances, particularly in Singing in the Rain, that is impossible to believe. But, as she explains in this book, she had, I think, 8 months of dance training before they started filming Singing in the Rain, and it was apparently the most grueling, horrific time ever. And it really just goes to highlight, there's also actually another episode involving a dangerous cross across some rapids, which I won't go into detail, I won't spoil it, but it definitely lifts the veil on the glamorous side of Hollywood. Obviously there are glamorous aspects, but it's definitely a really good source of when Hollywood is cruel and difficult, and kind of what it's really like. And I really, really thoroughly appreciate that honesty. So when she does talk about the film side of things, it's really thoroughly enjoyable. As I said, I started reading it one chapter a night because I wanted it to last, but probably around the halfway mark, maybe just before. I think for me it would have been after Eddie Fisher left her. I think by that point it became quite gripping, and I couldn't put it down. The writing size is quite small as well, so it definitely, you know, packs quite a lot in. And of course we have some wonderful pictures as well, which I won't spoil too much, but yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to reading the other two, but I'm pleased I started with this one. This one definitely seems like it's going to be the most comprehensive of the three. I've seen every single film she's ever done, and then I was waiting to finish those to read this so I could read about those films, and unfortunately that didn't happen too much. But never mind, really thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're a fan of Debbie Reynolds, or even a fan of the golden era of Hollywood, I think My Life is absolutely worth reading.